She had taught for 17 years in the same small town school where nothing much ever changed. The hallways always smelled of chalk and rain, and the children always came and went like seasons passing by. But that year was different because of one quiet boy sitting in the back row. His name was Eli. He was 12 years old, but his eyes were too old for his face. There was something heavy behind them, something he never said out loud. Every morning he came to class early and left late, as if the school was the only safe place he had left in the world. She first noticed him on a cold October morning when everyone was laughing about Halloween costumes, but he sat still staring out the window, his hands folded tightly around a notebook that was torn at the edges. She asked him where his costume was, and he whispered softly, "I didn't have one this year." She smiled gently. Anne said, "That's all right, maybe next year," and he nodded but didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the rain outside. As days turned into weeks, she saw the signs. He always wore the same clothes. His lunchbox was empty more often than not, and sometimes she found him sleeping with his head on his desk. When he thought no one was watching, she started to worry, but the boy never asked for anything. He never caused trouble. He just tried to disappear into the background like a shadow that didn't want to be seen. One afternoon, when everyone else had gone home, she saw him sitting alone in the hallway clutching his backpack. The janitor was locking up, and she asked him what he was doing there. He looked up and said softly, "I'm waiting for my mom. She's running late." She waited with him until the building grew quiet and empty. The sun went down and still no one came. Finally, she asked where his mom was coming from. He hesitated, then whispered, "She's working. We don't have a house right now. We sleep in the car." Her heart sank like a stone. She didn't know what to say. For a moment she just sat there beside him in silence, listening to the rain tapping on the windows. Then she said, "Come on, I'll drive you home." He shook his head. "No please, she doesn't like people knowing." But she drove him anyway and found a small old car parked behind a grocery store. The windows fogged from the cold. Inside, his mother sat with her head on the steering wheel, exhausted, ashamed, afraid. When she saw the teacher, she looked like she might cry. The teacher spoke softly, "I'm not here to judge, I just want to help." The mother shook her head. "No thank you, we'll be fine, we're saving for a place soon." But the teacher couldn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about that boy sitting in her class every day pretending to be all right when he had nothing waiting for him. After the bell rang, she thought about her own son, the one she lost years ago in a car accident, how she used to tuck him in every night, how she used to worry if he had eaten enough. And now another child was sleeping in a car out in the cold, and she couldn't ignore it. The next morning she called the mother again. She said, "I have a guest room. It's not much, but it's warm. Come stay until you get back on your feet." The mother resisted at first, but eventually agreed. "Just for a few days," she said, "just until payday." Those few days turned into a week, and that week turned into a month. Soon Eli had a bed of his own. He had breakfast waiting for him every morning. He had clean clothes for school, and laughter returned to his face little by little. He began to raise his hand in class, to smile, to make friends. He started bringing home good grades, and even helped her plant flowers in the front yard. She would watch him from the kitchen window as he laughed in the sunlight, and she realized something she hadn't felt in years. Her house felt alive again. One evening he came home from school holding a letter. It was from his teacher for the district spelling bee. He had qualified. She hugged him and told him how proud she was, and that night when he went to bed he whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." She smiled and said, "Always, that's what teachers do." But deep down she knew she wasn't just his teacher anymore. She had become something more. Months passed, seasons changed. The mother found a steady job and saved enough money for a small apartment nearby. On the day they moved out, Eli hugged her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat. He said, "You gave me a home when I didn't have one, and I'll never forget it." She cried quietly after they left because the house felt empty again. But in her heart she knew it was the right thing. Love isn't about holding on, it's about giving someone the strength to stand on their own. Years passed and life moved forward. She kept teaching. She grew older and her hair turned grey, but every now and then she'd think of that boy who once sat in the back of her class, wondering where he was, what he became. Then one spring afternoon she received a letter in the mail. Inside was a photo of a young man in a graduation gown, smiling proudly, with a message that said, "For the woman who taught me what home means." Her hands trembled as she read it. Tears filled her eyes. She sat down at her desk, the same desk where she once graded his papers, and whispered, "Thank you, God, for letting me be part of his story." Later that year he came to visit. She didn't recognize him at first. He was taller, stronger, confident. He hugged her and said, "I did it. I made it to college." She laughed through her tears and said, "I always knew you would." They sat together on the porch talking about old times, and as the sun set she realized something. This world is full of broken pieces and lonely hearts, but sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness, one open door, one brave choice to change the story of a life forever. She had spent years teaching lessons about math and words, but in the end it was love that became her greatest lesson. When he left that evening, he turned back one last time and said, "You'll always be my teacher," and she smiled, knowing that somewhere between the lessons and the laughter, between the pain and the healing, they had both found a family they didn't know they were searching for, and that was the most beautiful lesson of all. Years went by like seasons, turning quietly. She stayed in that same little house with the same creaking porch and fading white paint, still teaching though her steps had slowed and her hands shook. When she wrote on the board, her students were new faces every year, but sometimes when she looked at them she saw glimpses of that boy with tired eyes, Anne. A brave heart. She never forgot him, she never could, because he had left something behind in her life, a light that never went out. Every Christmas she would hang the same handmade ornament he gave her years ago, a small wooden apple painted red with shaky letters that said "Best Teacher," and every time she hung it she whispered a prayer for him, hoping he was safe, happy, alive. Sometimes she imagined him walking across a college campus with books in his arms, smiling the way he used to in her kitchen when he finally believed he was home. Then one winter morning, when snow covered everything in white, she got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, but older, stronger. Inside it said, "Dear Mrs. Taylor, I hope you still remember me. It's Eli. I finally finished medical school, and I wanted you to be the first to know. You once told me that every life has meaning, even the broken ones, and because of you I found mine. I'm coming home soon. I'd love to see you if you'll have me." Her hands trembled as she read the words. She laughed and cried all at once. The neighbors must have thought something was wrong, but it was just joy. After so many years she was finally going to see him again. She spent the next few days preparing. She baked his favorite cookies, cleaned the house, even bought fresh flowers for the table. She wanted everything to look just like it did when he was a boy. The day he arrived, she was standing on the porch waiting, wrapped in a wool scarf, the snow falling softly around her. A car pulled into the driveway, and when he stepped out her breath caught in her throat. He was taller now, older, a man in every way, but when he smiled she saw the same little boy who once sat in the back of her classroom. He ran up the steps and hugged her so tightly she could feel the years melt away. She whispered, "You came back," and he said, "I promised I would." They spent the afternoon talking. He told her about the nights he studied until dawn, about how he volunteered at shelters because he couldn't forget where he came from. He told her about his mother, how she finally owned a small bakery in town, and how every loaf she sold reminded her of the teacher who gave her back her dignity. They laughed and they cried, and she realized that sometimes love travels through time, carrying its blessings quietly until it finds its way home again. Before he left, he reached into his bag and handed her a small envelope. She opened it, and inside was a key. Confused, she looked at him, and he said, "I bought something I want you to see." She followed him outside into the cold, the sky glowing with sunset. He drove her a few blocks down to a small brick building with a wooden sign that said "The Taylor House." She looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. He smiled and said, "It's a home for homeless kids, a place where they can sleep, study, eat and dream. Just like you gave me that chance years ago. I wanted to name it after the person who taught me what love really means." Her tears fell freely. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. He took her hand and said, "This is your legacy. Every child who walks through these doors will carry a piece of you with them." She walked through the rooms, fresh paint, new beds, shelves full of books, drawings on the walls. She could already hear laughter echoing through the halls. She turned to him and whispered, "You've done more than I ever did." And he said, "No, I just followed the lesson you taught me." As weeks went by, she began to volunteer there every afternoon, reading to the children, helping them with homework, telling them stories about kindness and hope. Sometimes when she looked into their eyes, she saw pieces of herself, the tired woman who once thought she had nothing left to give, and the boy who once thought he didn't belong in the world. Both of them had found something sacred in each other. One evening as the sun set, she stood outside the building watching the children play, the sky painted in gold and lavender. Eli walked beside her and said, "You know, sometimes I think about that night when you knocked on our car window. I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't." She smiled softly and said, "Maybe someone else would have." But he shook his head. "No, not like you," he said. "You didn't just save me, you gave me the courage to save others." Years later, when she passed away peacefully in her sleep, the whole town came to say goodbye. The children from the Taylor house stood in a line, each holding a single white rose. Eli spoke at the service, his voice trembling as he said, "She taught me that family is not always the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one that finds you when you're lost." He placed the small wooden apple from his childhood on her coffin and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a home." And though she was gone, her spirit remained in every corner of that little house and in every laugh that echoed through the Taylor house, because love like hers never fades. It multiplies through the hearts it touches, spreading light into places that once knew only darkness. And in the quiet nights when snow fell softly outside the windows, you could almost feel her presence, a whisper in the wind, saying, "Keep going, keep loving, keep believing, because every act of kindness is the beginning of another miracle waiting to be told." The years rolled on quietly like a soft river, carrying the stories of all who had come and gone through the Taylor house. The little brick home that once began as a dream now stood tall and full of light. Every evening its windows glowed warm against the night sky, a beacon for those who had nowhere else to turn. Eli kept his promise. He took care of it the way she once took care of him. He made sure every child who came through its doors felt seen, heard, and loved the way she had made him feel when he was a scared 12-year-old boy sitting in the back of her classroom. He often walked the halls at night when the children were asleep, listening to the sound of breathing, the rustle of blankets, the quiet peace that only safety brings, and he would whisper, "Thank you, Mrs. Taylor, we're still learning from you." The Taylor house became more than a shelter. It became a beginning, a place where children found not just food or warmth, but hope. One girl named Ava came at 13. She had lived in 6 foster homes before this one. She never spoke the first few weeks. She flinched when anyone raised their voice, but one afternoon Eli found her sitting by the window tracing letters on the glass. He asked what she was writing, and she said, "I'm writing home." He smiled and said, "You already found it." Then there was Jonah, a boy who came in with a broken arm and a broken heart. He used to sleep curled up in a corner until one of the volunteers left a stuffed bear by his bed the next morning. He was still holding it when he woke up, and for the first time he smiled. From then on he never slept without it. Small things like that, little kindnesses, they built a bridge back to life piece by piece. On weekends the house filled with laughter, cooking lessons, music, old board games. Eli started a tradition he called Taylor Talks. Every Sunday night the children would gather in the living room and share something good that happened that week. It didn't matter how small. One girl said, "I passed my spelling test." Another said, "I made a new friend." One boy said, "I didn't cry last night," and everyone clapped because here every victory mattered. Years passed and the children grew. Some left to study, some found jobs, some started families of their own, but they all carried a piece of the Taylor house within them. Each one became a living chapter of her legacy, and every year on the anniversary of her passing they all came back. They brought flowers, photographs, letters. They filled the rooms with stories about how one woman's love had changed the path of their lives. One summer evening the house celebrated its 20th year. The walls had been repainted, the garden filled with roses planted in her memory. People came from all over the country, former residents, teachers, volunteers, even city officials stood under strings of lights sharing food and memories. Eli gave a small speech, his voice soft but strong. He said, "She once taught me that kindness doesn't end when you do something good. It lives on inside the people you help. It multiplies like a heartbeat, and that heartbeat is what keeps the Taylor house alive." That night after everyone left he stood alone in the garden, the moon shining over the roof, the air filled with the smell of roses. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he could almost hear her voice again, gentle, calm, proud, saying, "You did well, my boy." He smiled and whispered, "I only followed your lesson." As time went on, Eli grew older, gray at the temples, but still full of purpose. One winter he fell ill and had to rest for weeks. The children visited, bringing drawings and letters. They called him their hero, but he always shook his head. "No, she was the hero. I was just the one who learned from her." When he recovered, he decided to create something new, a scholarship fund in her name for children who grew up in the Taylor house. He said Mrs. Taylor believed in giving second chances, so this will be hers. The first recipient was Ava, the quiet girl who once wrote home on the window. She stood on stage with tears in her eyes and said, "I don't remember my parents, but I remember Mrs. Taylor because her kindness raised all of us, even those she never met." When she finished, the crowd stood and clapped, and Eli felt the same warmth he had felt the day she took him in years ago. The circle had come back to where it began. Eventually Eli passed too, peacefully surrounded by the people whose lives had been changed by his and hers. On the night he died, the lights in the Taylor house stayed on all night. Hundreds of candles lined the porch as the children, now grown, sang softly the same lullaby Mrs. Taylor used to hum while tucking them in, and in that quiet glow it felt as if two souls were finally home again. Today the Taylor house still stands, the garden still blooms, and the sound of laughter still drifts through the air. Generations of children come and go, but the spirit inside never fades. Teachers visit and tell new volunteers about the woman who started it all, a teacher with no children of her own who became a mother to many. They show her picture on the wall, her kind eyes, her gentle smile, and every child who looks at it seems to stand a little taller, as if her light still touches them. And maybe it does, maybe somewhere beyond the veil of time she watches, still smiling at the house that bears her name, at the lives still being mended by her love, because love like that never ends. It echoes through the years, whispering to the lonely and the lost that home is not just a place, it's a feeling. It's the warmth of someone who believes in you. It's the voice that says you matter, you belong, you are loved. So when the sun sets over that small American town and the lights of the Taylor house begin to glow once more, you can almost hear it, a faint familiar voice carried in the wind saying, keep going, keep loving, keep believing, because kindness is the only lesson that never fades.